So I wanted to start a little series on my TikTok, kind of like getting to know me, and I just like listening to people's stories. I find that I'm a recovering alcoholic, and in the program, and when you're in these AA meetings, you hear people's stories and you think, oh my God, how did they survive that? And it's like everybody has such an interesting, complex, traumatic story, and it's just unbelievable. Like, when I tell people my story and the things that have happened in my life, people are like, what? But if you think about it, like, we all have a story, a very interesting story. And so I wanted to share mine, and I want people to get to know me. So basically, I'll start right from the beginning. I'm the youngest of 4 girls, and my parents got divorced when I was 2 years old. And I would visit my father every other weekend with my sisters, and my father was an alcoholic, and I guess that's where I got it from. But we would visit him every other weekend, and when I was about 7 or 8 years old, we started doing family counseling, and I didn't know why. It was just my mom said, let's do family counseling. So we would go to these family counseling sessions, and one day we were in this meeting with the counselor, and they sat us down and told us that my father was being arrested for molesting children. And I just remember being so devastated that I could never see my dad again. And spoiler alert, I do see my dad again. It's a very interesting story, actually, but we'll get to that in another part. So yeah, found out that my dad was molesting children, and that was devastating. The hardest part for me was that I really loved my dad, and I loved spending time with him, and it was like, because he didn't do it to me, I couldn't really understand it. It was a very difficult situation for me to understand as a young child, and I was just devastated that I couldn't see my dad anymore. And my dad and my stepmom got married on Christmas Eve, and every Christmas Eve for years after I found out about this, I just cried in my room because I couldn't see my dad. And turns out it was for the best. So yeah, he was not a good person. He did absolutely horrible things, and it just really messed me up for a long time. And it also kind of, I think that's the reason why my man picker is so off, because I never had a strong father figure. I do have my stepdad, who I consider to be my dad, but he's very non-emotional. I don't think I've ever hugged him. I know he loves me very much, and I love him very much, but it's just one of those things where, I don't know. I grew up always wanting attention from a male figure, and I spent years looking for the wrong ones and spending time with men who did absolutely horrific things to me, and I allowed it for some fucked up reason. Actually, I know why. It's because I was an alcoholic, and I felt like so low that I deserved everything that I got. So yeah, and because I was the youngest of 4 girls, and we didn't have a strong father figure in our life, and there was some sexual abuse going on in our family, my sisters had children really young. My first sister was 15 when she got pregnant, and my second sister, who's a year above me, she got pregnant. She was in grade 8. She graduated grade 8, 8 months pregnant. So she was 14 when she gave birth to my nephew. And at the time I thought, well, my sisters are having children young, and I was helping take care of them, and I thought I could do that, like, it's kids, how hard can it be? And so I decided to get pregnant at 16, and yeah, that was a really bad situation with the man who unbelievably horrible things this man did. I thought, like most girls, that having his baby would change him and he would be a great person, but it didn't turn out that way. So I'll get more into that in part 2. Good morning, guys. So this is part 2 of Who Am I, if you're interested at all. I think we all have a really interesting story. So anyways, so where I left off was I got pregnant and I thought that having a baby with the man that I was with would change him. And I'll just tell you, so when I was in labor, first of all, he never came to any doctor's appointments with me or sonograms or anything. My sister and my best friend came with me. When I went into labor, he came to the hospital. His whole family came to the hospital. His friends came to the hospital, and he was there during the birth, and like watched her being born. But then as soon as she was born, he went out to tell all of his friends that she was born, and they decided that they needed to go celebrate. And so he just left the hospital, and his brother stuck around and helped me get into the, like, upstairs to the hospital bed, like the room that I was going to be admitted to. And he helped, like, move me from the bed, like from the delivery bed to like my actual bed, and like he's seen pretty much everything. And the doctors were even saying things like, okay, Dad. And I'm like, he's not the dad, he's the uncle. 1 second. So yeah, he had gone out partying with his friends, drinking, whatever. And so I basically did everything on my own. I went through severe postpartum depression. I was really good with kids. I just, not my own. My own was like, I'm sure people know this, but once you have a baby, like her cries like did something to my insides, and I just couldn't handle it. It was so much for me. I went through the worst postpartum depression, so much so that I understood how people could leave their babies on church doorsteps. Like, I would never have done that, but it was so bad. And when she was about 3 months old, she was very skinny, like as a baby, and I thought that she just took after her dad because her dad was slim. And my sister came in one day and she was like, Jessica, there's something wrong with her. Like, she's not gaining weight. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, take her to the doctors. I'm like, okay. So I took her to the doctors, and they weighed her, and she was almost 4 months old. She was only 9 pounds. And so they rushed us to the hospital. They admitted us right away, and she was admitted as failing to thrive. And it was absolute hell. And I remember calling her dad and saying, like, can you please come to the hospital? You know, she's been admitted. And he's like, I don't like hospitals. I don't do good in hospitals. And I'm like, yeah, me neither. Like, anyways, I spent a week there with her, and it was absolute hell. It was hell. Like, I think I've told this story before, but because she was failing to thrive, but I still wanted her. She was breastfed. And so what would happen was she would eat all of the, like, she would drink all the watery stuff at the front of the boob, I guess, and then pass out, and then she wouldn't eat anymore. And she wasn't getting, like, the fatty stuff. 1 second. So what would happen was we decided that we wanted to continue breastfeeding her so she would have my, like, antibodies and stuff. And so we would use formula and tape a syringe right here and tape the tube to match it with my nipple. She would drink both, and what would happen was she was starving, and so she would suck so hard that the tube would go down her throat, make her throw up, and then she wasn't getting any nutrition at all. So we had to stop breastfeeding. And then we found out she had an allergic reaction to cow's milk, so that was fun too. She blew up. Like, her hands looked like boxing gloves, her feet, she had hives all over her body. It was absolute hell, and her dad was nowhere to be found. And the amount of things that this man did to me, like, I can't even, this is just one thing, but he goes on to cheat on me with his brother's girlfriend's best friend. And there's a situation that happens on a New Year's Eve. So my daughter was born in October. So October, November, December, January. So she was 3 months old, and we were supposed to hang out all night. He gave me money so I could take my mom to dinner. Took my mom to dinner. And I told him, you have to be with me at midnight so we can say, you know, Happy New Year and give each other kisses and whatever. And he's like, yeah, of course. So he came, we met up at his, we met up, and then he said, let's go to my friend's place. And I'm like, okay, let's go. And so we got there, and And when we got there, the girl that he had been cheating on me with, who I had suspected that he had been cheating on me with, and then later found out that he was there. And I was so uncomfortable with that. I had my 3-month-old baby. I was going through depression, and like she's sitting there all perfect and perky and being like laughing and stuff, and I'm like, so I said to him, I'm like, we have to leave. Like, I'm not going to sit here all night with this girl. And he's like, you can leave. I'm not leaving. And so I had no way home. So I ended up walking home to his place, his parents' place. And I had my daughter in her car seat and a snowsuit and everything. And I had my hands wrapped around her car seat like this, so that her whole body and everything was like snuggled into me, and so that she was warm. My fingers felt like they were going to break off, is how cold they were. And I got home to his parents' place and I cried. I was so upset. And then about 2 hours later, I hear the door open and he comes in with her and they're laughing. And I'm just... Anyway, that's it for part 2. Okay, so this is part 3 of getting to know me. And the last part 2, I left off at coming home from the New Year's Eve party thing and crying, and then having my child's father come in at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with the woman who I suspected he had been cheating on me with. Anyway, he had denied everything. I was like, I know you're cheating on me with her, and he was like gaslighting me like you wouldn't believe. And to be honest, I think one of the main reasons why I put up with so much from him was because he was my first everything. I was 14 when I started dating him. The phone just keeps ringing here. I guess I have to work when I'm at work. Anyways, just kidding. So yeah, he had gaslit me and told me that there was nothing going on. And like I said, I put up with so much from him because he was my first everything, my first love, my first experience. You know what I'm talking about? He was literally everything to me. And I just had a child with him. So like now he was like I was tied to him. And after denying the cheating on me for months, one day he just gets up and tells me he doesn't want to be with me anymore and he's breaking up with me. And I knew it was for this woman, but they don't want me to tell the story. I hate having to work. One second. So needless to say, I was absolutely devastated that he was leaving me. Like, it was my first breakup. I was 17, just turned 17. I just had a new body from giving birth, and I had stretch marks from my eyebrows to my toes, and I was just feeling I was going through postpartum depression. It was really bad. I was just feeling like I couldn't live without him. So I did something that, do you ever see those posts on Facebook that say like, what would you tell your teenage self? Or what would you have done differently when you were a teenager? Or like, what advice would you give your teenage self? And God, the amount of times I think about what I did, I begged him not to leave me. I was literally on my knees begging him, crying not to leave me. And if I could go back, I would beat the crap out of myself and be like, get the fuck up and know what you're worth. And interesting story, as I was begging him to not leave me, there's a knock on his bedroom door. And he opens it, and it's that woman, the woman that he wanted to break up with me for. And as I'm crying on my knees, begging him to stay with me, she steps over me to go get her CD out of his CD player. And I am not a violent person, but that day could have ended up very differently. Like, I saw myself standing up, grabbing her by the hair, dragging her down the stairs, and bringing her out the back door and doing horrible things to her. I'm so happy that I didn't. And spoiler alert, we're actually friends now. I spent a couple of Christmases with her, and she's actually an amazing person, but we were teenagers and we were stupid back then. So yeah, I begged him, and he just was like, nope, I'm done with you. And I was devastated. And that's basically how we broke up. He ended up having a child with this woman. And so now that's my daughter's only sister, and they're super close. And after years of being with him, she realized how much of a loser he was. And so that was my first relationship. And the things that he did, he wasn't physically abusive. He was emotionally and mentally abusive. He would say things like, he would tell me that no man would ever get with me unless I got a huge bottle of makeup to cover my stretch marks. He would make fun of me in front of his friends. He would say things, if you're ever looking for Jessica, look for a bucket of chicken. He would say the most hurtful things, like just unbelievably hurtful things. And when we had broken up, my self-esteem was non-existent. And that's when I entered my second relationship, which is my longest relationship and unbelievably horrific. Police being called numerous times, just absolutely horrific. But just for reference, I'm just going to put in a picture here. This was me and my child's father when I was 14 years old. This was before she was born. And I don't have too many pictures of us, but this was us. And that's it for part 3. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Good morning. This is part 4 of my story. And we left off part 3 when my ex broke up with me for another woman. And I was a new mom, just coming out of a 6-year relationship with somebody who beat my self-esteem down to absolutely nothing. I was dealing with postpartum depression. I was a mess. So I I had a best friend for my high school years, and we ended up dabbling in substances, and it got really ugly. But before that happened, we would go to her aunt's place all the time. And one day we were just sitting on the balcony, and we look over and we saw this man. He was like grilling something on the barbecue, and I was like, ooh, who's that? What is he making? And I thought he was good looking and whatever. And so we went to the park with, I think, my friend's son, maybe my daughter, I can't remember, but we went to the park, and on our way back I saw the guy again, and he was like, hey, why don't you guys come over and have a drink and blah blah blah. And we're like, okay. And then basically I started dating this man. He told me he was, at the time I think I was 19, and he told me he was 27. And I was like, cool, whatever. We started dating, and I quickly realized he was not 27. He was 12 years older than me, so I think he was 31, 32, something like that. And I had found out that he had just gotten out of prison. He was in prison for 5 years for armed robbery. I saw immediately in this man that he had anger issues, like big time anger issues, and I was like, okay, this isn't good. I don't think I can do this. And I remember one day we were leaving his apartment, me, him, and his 9-year-old daughter, and we got into the elevator, and she had like a bunch of like school books and stuff in her hand, and she had dropped them all on the elevator floor, and he lost his shit, and he actually started to kick her. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, I freaked out on him, and I was like, you do not, like, I just lost it. And then I was like, okay, I can't do this. I can't be with somebody like this. And so I stormed off. I went walking through the parking lot because I was going to go home. And he kept calling after me, and he said, Jessica, I love you. And this was after like 3 weeks of dating. And as soon as I heard the words, I love you, I was like, what? He loves me? Like, but I thought I would never be able to find another man, and maybe I can help him, maybe I can make him better, and blah blah blah. And so all I needed to hear was that he loved me, and then I was like, okay, cool. So I ended up getting back with him, and he promised that he wouldn't act that way anymore and all this crap. Anyway, pretty much the entire relationship was one big alcohol, drug fueled nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. There was situation where he had allowed a man to come live with him, a friend of his, and I knew this guy, like, relatively, you know, like, as my boyfriend's friend, and I don't know, they would hang out and party all the time, and I would hang out and party with them all the time, but we didn't live together. I would only go over there on weekends, and I used to have to fight with my daughter to go over there, and I always thought it was because she just didn't like to have to share her mother's attention with anybody, and like, I just thought that I didn't know why, but she would fight me constantly about going over there, and I just never understood why. And one day, so yeah, sorry, I had to stop there for a second. So one day, me and my daughter are at home, and I decide I'm going to take her to the park. And we go to the park, and I'm pushing her on the swing, and all of a sudden, a friend of mine comes walking up to me. She was a girl that I used to go to school with, and we had the same name. Like, her name is Jessica, my name is Jessica. She has a different last name, and our address is almost identical, except it's off by one digit. And she came up to me, and she was like, "Can I talk to you for a sec?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." And she's like, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And she's like, "'Cause I got this letter in the mail from Children's Aid, and I opened it. I thought it was for me, but it's actually for you. And it's talking about wanting to investigate you, and they're worried about your daughter and stuff." And I was like, "Oh my God, what the hell? How can that be?" And the only thing I could think of was my daughter and her cousins and friends. We used to have a trailer up north, and one day they went out and they were lighting fires in the forest and then putting them out, and then lighting fires and then putting them out, lighting fires, putting them out. And one of the fires that they lit did not go out, and it burnt down 2 trailers. They weren't being occupied, but it still burnt down 2 trailers. And I remember my mom and I were sitting on the deck of the trailer, and we're having a few beers, and we see the fire trucks come into the trailer park. And at the time, her dad, my daughter's dad, also had a trailer in the same park. So when it was his weekend, he would have her up there, and it was his weekend this weekend. Anyway, we saw the fire trucks pull in, and me and my mom just look at each other, and we're like, "Oh, why can't people just celebrate properly? And why do people have to take it so far?" Blah, blah, blah. Little did I know, my daughter was part of the reason why they were there. So anyway, the OPP got involved because of the situation, and I guess because it was kids starting fires and stuff, they had wanted Children's Aid to investigate or something. Like, I think it's like mandatory, I don't know. So I thought maybe that's what it was in regards to, right? Like, I had no idea. So I thanked my friend, and I went home, and on the way home from the park, my daughter was just bawling her eyes out, and I couldn't figure out why she was crying. And I was like, "It's okay, like, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. They won't take you from me. You know, I'm a good mom. You'll be fine." And she just wouldn't stop crying, and I couldn't figure out why. And so I sat her down in front of me in the living room. I was sitting on the lounge chair, and she was sitting on the coffee table. And I looked her in the eyes, and I said, "Is there anything you want to tell me? Is there anything? Did anybody hurt you? Did anybody?" And she's just shaking her head no, and just crying and crying. And I was like, "Did anybody touch you?" And she nodded yes. And I will never forget the pain that I felt. I remember I couldn't breathe, and she just kept saying, "Breathe, mommy, breathe." And I was like, I just couldn't. I stood up and I started pacing, and I couldn't stop pacing because I felt like if I stopped moving, that's when the pain would really hit. And then I realized why she fought me so much about going to my ex-boyfriend's place. And just to be clear, it wasn't my ex-boyfriend, it was his roommate. But it was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. And the amount of blaming I did on myself, unreal. And one of the things that was so hard about that was because my dad had done this to my family and to other children, I genuinely thought I'd be able to see the signs. Like, I would know if this was happening, especially to my daughter, the one person I'm supposed to protect. And I didn't see it. I didn't know. It was absolutely devastating. So we had called the police, and the man was arrested, and I was probably at the height of my alcoholism during this time, and I convinced myself that the only way to help my daughter is to continue to drink, because if I didn't drink, I wouldn't be able to sleep. If I didn't sleep, I wouldn't be able to take her to counseling and to her school and to like whatever else she needed to do. And so I convinced myself with my alcoholic brain that I needed to still drink to be there for her. So I did continue to drink for about a year after that happened. And then I got sober. But that was during the relationship with my second boyfriend. And that's just one part of that, time period. But then I decided I was going to get sober. And that's an interesting story in itself. So we'll leave that for part 4. Part 5. Sorry for being so dramatic. I hope you have a good day, and I don't want to leave it on a sad end. My daughter's doing fantastic now. She has a son, and he's my grandson, and she's in a beautiful house, and she's so happy, and she's sober. So, good afternoon. So this is part 5 of Getting to Know Me, my story, and sorry that I left the last one a little bit depressing, but there's a lot of depressing things that have happened in my life, as with many people, like we all have a story, like I said. So anyway, when I found out what happened to my daughter, we had the man arrested. I put her in counseling, and I went to counseling with her every week. It was really nice. The place that I worked allowed me to leave and still be paid, and that was great. I was able to go every week with her to counseling, and basically my daughter would have like an hour with the counselor, and then I would have an hour with the counselor, and then we would have an hour together, and like it was really good. I'm going to see if I can try and find a letter that the counselor wrote to me that I can read you guys, because anyways, so the man was arrested, and like I said, I had foolishly convinced myself that drinking would only benefit me and her, because I wouldn't be able to sleep and I wouldn't be able to do anything unless I had alcohol. And so I continued to drink for a while, and it was a nightmare. Like, it was an absolute nightmare. She would go to her dad's on weekends, and then that's when I would hang out with my friend and party and drink and partake in other substances. And there was one evening when I went to a place called The Studios, and it was my best friend's aunt's boyfriend's place. It was like a place where they rented out studio space for people to record songs and stuff. And at the time, I was heavily into a substance, and there was a man there that was a substance dealer, and he was allowing me and my best friend to partake in as much as we wanted. And I was having a great time, and I looked over at my best friend who was sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden she was convulsing, seizuring, her veins were popping out of her neck. She was overdosing, and I just freaked out. I asked somebody for a cell phone, and I called 911 right away, and I was like screaming at everyone, saying like, what's the address here? Give me the address. Where are we? And I knew the street we were on, but I didn't know the address. And so I told the dispatcher the street, but nobody, not even my best friend's aunt, would give me the address, because they were afraid they were going to get in trouble. And like, my friend is ODing on the couch. Thank God she actually came to, and she was okay. And what happened was, we were at the end of a street, like a long industrial street area, and the ambulance and police had gone to every warehouse on this street and didn't find anybody. And then we were the last warehouse on the street, and when they got there, the owner of the studios had gone up to speak to the ambulance people and the policemen and said that they were like, yeah, somebody called us, where's the woman who's overdosing? And he was like, some guy dropped his girlfriend off here and said she was overdosing, and then she came to and they took off, and that was it. The police were like, okay, and they just left. And so it was me and my friend who had just had this unbelievable near-death experience, and I was just like, now what? Like, it was absolutely horrific. I went through post-traumatic stress disorder after that because I couldn't close my eyes without seeing it. I couldn't shower, and like the shampoo would get into my eyes because anytime I closed my eyes, I would see her convulsing, and it was so bad. And so at this point, I had stopped drinking for fun and started drinking for necessity because I couldn't, like I said, it was post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was bad. It was really bad. And the man that supplied us with these party favors was a very bad man, and I had heard that he had done absolutely horrible things to people, like shaving a woman's head and just like really bad things, and beating people and all this stuff. And so anyway, that night we went to a hotel so that my friend could kind of come to and be okay. And when we're at the hotel, this man, the dealer, decided he wanted to do something to me, and he told everybody that we were with that I had stolen all of his money. And I am not that stupid, not even a little bit. Like, why would I mean, first of all, he's supplying me with the stuff that I was using at the time. Why would I steal his money to what? Go get more? Like, the guy was giving it to me for free. He made this story up because he wanted everybody to leave me alone with him so that he could do unspeakable things to me. But thank God, my friend and her aunt were like, we're leaving. We're taking her with us. And anyways, that night I lost my keys, and I was so scared that he was going to come after me. I used to go into my apartment and I would prop the door open, like the front door open, with like a knife or something. I'd prop it open, and when I came home from grocery shopping, I would go through each room of the house and clear it first before I would close the door, because I was so scared that he was in my apartment. Absolute nightmare. And like, you know what? It's not even like, I forget sometimes how bad things used to be. And like, now I'm sober and happy, and I've been sober for 13 going on 14 years, and it's good to talk about these things because it reminds me of a place I never want to be ever again. So I'll leave it there for now. That's part 5, and I'll see you tomorrow for part 6.